Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on the region from where you join us. Welcome to what is going to be the second webinar organized by IFRA on the Volume of Use survey, which we have just launched. And this session here today is actually dedicated to answer questions you might have with regard to the survey. The webinar is recorded. For those who haven't provided their questions in writing yet, please feel free to do so and use the Q&A tool to do this. Not the chat, please just the Q&A tool. For this webinar, I'm going to be joined by a number of distinguished colleagues from IFRA and RIFM, and I'm going to name them alphabetically. So there will be Kimberly Anshiaba from RIFM joining me, my colleague Jennifer Dodds from IFRA, Mary Mirkovic from RIFM, and Kristen Saxa-Vasquez also from RIFM. Before we actually go into answering questions that have already been posted in writing and that we expect to be posted during this webinar, I'm going to show a number of charts just to remind us or you on what the Volume of Use survey is all about. So some of the key aspects. And let me share with you also the information that the first webinar that we had organized is still available and accessible, and we will share a link at the end of this short slide deck. So just to remind us what the Volume of Use survey is all about. One of the key purposes is to be the basis or create what we call transparency list, which is a snapshot in time information on the materials used in our industry. And the Volume of Use survey is the tool for us to provide us this information. Certainly, the Volume of Use is also very important for informing the RIFM safety assessment process and very specifically to support the environmental risk assessments. Last but not least, it's also very helpful for us when we are faced with regulatory challenges to understand which materials are used in our industry and at which volume. So to put a ranking with regard to the need to get engaged. So this is also a very positive side effect of having this information on the aggregated volumes that we collect in the survey. As mentioned, we have just launched survey on March 27. It remains open until 30th of September this year. And the target for the survey are all the volumes used in the calendar year 2023. It's about the ingredients and their volumes used in the production of fragrance mixtures, which are then sold to customers, which can either be finished consumer producers or other fragrance houses in the form of bases, but they find their way untouched in other formulations. So this is the focus: fragrance mixtures used in finished consumer products or sold as bases and mixtures that are then used by other fragrance houses and are not touched again anymore. All this data aggregation and the reporting is happening totally anonymous. So the data that are going to be visible eventually to regulators in any form or that appear in the RIFM safety assessments are the aggregated volumes, and there is no tracking possible to the reporters. And all information is treated fully confidential by the people at IFRA and RIFM engaged in the collection and the performance of the Volume of Use survey. With the launch of the survey, we did not only send out a guidance document and the files, but the guidance document or the instructions are very comprehensive and, to our understanding, should help the reporters to provide the information as precise and as correct as possible. There's a number of do's and don'ts describing which volumes should be reported or what should not be reported. So for example, we do look at volumes of ingredients used in oral care because they are part of the RIFM safety assessment under the fragrance part. So those volumes should be reported, as well as ingredients used in, again, submixtures or bases that are then used by the recipient without any further modification. So it's actually the producer of these submixtures that brings the volumes into the market. What should not be reported are volumes of solutions or dilutions, only need fragrance materials, and the solvent should be reported separately. And also when it's about concretes or resins in the natural sector, if those are not used as such in the fragrance mixture used in the finished product, but more in an intermediate type, then those volumes should not be reported. It would then be up to the company who is actually further processing these materials to report the volumes of the resulting ingredients. So this is just some examples that you find in the instructions to help the companies participating in the survey on what to report and on what not to report. Again, there is also files that have been prepared, one for discrete chemical reporting, the other one for reporting of natural complex substances that show the materials that have been reported in either of the last two surveys, and that help facilitating of the data reporting, but specifically then at the other end also on the data processing. And thereby it very much should minimize errors in reporting. So we urge and strongly recommend the participants to use these files for the reporting of the volumes of the respective materials. Again, one file dedicated to discrete chemicals and one file dedicated to naturals. For the naturals, we will have some more information a little bit later. We ask for reporting by regions, and we are working with 4 regions: Europe, Middle East, and Africa, North America, which covers United States and Canada, Central and South America, another region, and last but not least, the Asia Pacific region. And here is some exception this time, because we do ask to report Japan, so it is without any doubt part of the Asia Pacific region, separately this time. So volumes used in production for fragrance mixtures in Japan should be reported separately. Why is that? The rationale is in the way the RIFM environmental safety assessments are performed, and the wastewater treatment in Japan is relatively similar to what's used in North America and Europe. And therefore, the calculations specifically for the PACs and PNICs can be used and can be transferred for the PACs, sorry, not for the PNICs. So that is, and that would lead to a better outcome of the safety assessment. Therefore, we would ask you to report these volumes separately. So this is to address specifically needs and requests coming from our RIFM colleagues, again, to support their important work in performing risk assessment for the environmental endpoint. It's very important to have accurate results, and it's very important to have representative results. So we need as much participation as possible from the membership and also from any other fragrance producer. The survey does not only target our members, but certainly this is the ones we can most easily reach, but any producer of fragrance mixtures is encouraged and invited to report the volumes. Our tools, our files, and the guidance, again, should help in making this reporting as most accurate as possible. And we are also asking our member associations to distribute the documentation and the files as broadly as they can, so that we reach all possible fragrance mixture producers for having a good return rate in this survey. We also felt it might be useful, and we had spent quite some time in the first webinar on describing the system by which we characterize naturals, and that should then be used also in identifying the right volumes to be reported for the right material. We have a code developed some years ago, and I think we shared a lot of information on how it should be used. And the code with a number defines the botanical species. Then we have a letter that describes the part of the plant. And last but not least, there's a number describing the processing code and the way or the method the material is processed. So in this combination of number, letter, and number again, we should be, or we are in an excellent way in clearly understanding what part of the plant extract or which plant extract we talk about. And this is extremely helpful then later on in, again, assigning or doing the right risk assessment for the respective species, helping us to understand what is actually used. This is an overview slide or an extract of the reporting file, again, showing all this in more detail, where you have more characterizing help and additional information like family names and so on. So you find all this information already in the reporting file, and then this should help you to clearly assign which extract you are using and then put the volume in the right column. We also provide cast numbers and additional alternative casts, but again, for the naturals, this is typically not enough, and that is why we have introduced this code, as I just explained. The recording of the first webinar, again, which was providing much more detail on the help and the approach to be used for the reporting in the Volume of Use survey, is still available, and also the documents are easily to be found in a Dropbox system. We will share these slides with all the participants in this webinar, and then you can use the links to access these documents and this information unless you already have it. And that would now be the moment to invite my colleagues to join me, and we would start answering questions that has been received, and they will be posed to us by my colleague, Charles de Lusignan.
Thank you very much, Matthias. And indeed, as a reminder to everyone watching, if you would like to ask additional questions in addition to the ones that we're about to read out now, please do not hesitate to put them in the Q&A section. So the questions we've received now are ones that were sent to us during the registration. And we will do our best to answer them now. But as I say, during the process, feel free to not only post your questions, but also mention who you would like to see answer them. So first up, a question to Kristen. What do I do if a material I want to report is not on the survey table? What do we need to include? Thanks.
Okay. So the worksheets that were sent out, the reporting tables, both for the naturals and for the chemicals, have an extra spreadsheet within them that has the structure of the information but are blank. So make sure any materials that you can't find on the survey table, you add into those additional materials or newly added materials spreadsheets. And when you do that, make sure you add as much identification information as possible, because we do check that with other external websites like SciFinder. So we verify the identity of the material. So as much information you could provide as possible is very helpful. So EC number, CAS number, material name, synonym. If it's a natural, it's very helpful if you give the information for the processing codes that Matthias just mentioned. And then also remember, because it's a new material, that you may be requested for additional information for safety assessment purposes, like a sample of the material, concentration data. So yes, it's very possible to add new materials for addition to the safety assessment queue. But make sure you provide as much of that identity information as possible.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. Okay, we have another one for Mary Merkovich from RIFM. What happens after a new material is added to the survey? How will the new materials reported be integrated in the RIFM safety assessment program?
Hi. So once we receive the new material in the volume of use survey, which we also as Matthias had mentioned, there is another table in the table in the Excel table sheet. So you would give us all the information as Kristen had mentioned. We then, once you submit it, we will get a confirmation back to you that we received the new material. And then if you could do a quick review of those new materials, we request that we get that back within 30 days, because what we do with it is we need to add it to the IFRA transparency list, as well as the RIFM database. And once it is entered into the database, it then goes into the RIFM safety assessment program list. Also, just if you could please make sure that you're filling out, that your company starts to fill out the RIFM concentration surveys as well, that RIFM and IFRA sends out. And if you have any study data on that material, if you could please submit that to RIFM as well, because it'll start the safety assessment program a little quicker. So this way they don't have to search for the data, or since it is a new material, as well as they may come back to ask for the material as well for their own personal studies or RIFM studies.
Thank you, very clear. So I've submitted some information, and then 6 months later, I noticed that I made a mistake. What do I do? This one is for Jennifer Dortz from IFRA. What do I do if I've made a mistake?
Yes, so thanks, Charles, for the question. So if you report a material incorrectly, we would suggest you to contact IFRA, so Matthias or myself, or RIFM. You could contact Mary anytime after you have reported the volume of use. So it happens, just please contact us once you noticed that mistake.
Thank you. So then additionally, what do I need to do to report captive materials? Do I need to report them at all?
Yes, so indeed, that's a good question. So the captive are not included on the distributed survey, but they will appear on the final IFRA transparency list. So the captive should be reported and should be indicated as such in the survey in the column named comments of the reporting file. So if you look at attachment 1 and attachment 2, you will have a column that is entitled comments, and that's where you need to mention your captive material. Thanks.
Thank you very much. That's very clear. So this one is for Kimberly. Kimberly, what do I do if I can't determine which part of the plant the material is produced from?
Thank you. So we do ask if you can discuss this with your supplier and try your best to come to the best conclusion. If you are still unable to come to a conclusion and the material is not listed in the volume of use survey, we just ask if you can add that material to that additional material file or tab, and just indicate your concern in that notes section.
Okay, that's clear. So to suppliers, if you have any other questions, good. Then another one from Mary. What do I do if I agree with the material in the survey file, but I think there may be an error with the registry number or the name and so on?
So what we did do in the Excel file is we added the a comments column at the end, I believe. And that's where you can elaborate any type of information that you find that may be incorrect in that file.
Okay, very, very clear. Thank you. And then we have a final one here. So if there are questions from the audience, now would be the time to start writing them in. This is for Kristen and for Kimberly, between you. What is a RIFM second round NCS? And how do I know if one of my reported materials is considered second round?
Okay, so in the NCS table, there is a column, I believe it's S. Column S will indicate if it's a second round material. And really just what this means is that we understand, based on the processing of the material, that it's a more specialized type NCS, and that maybe only 1 or 2 companies report these materials because they're so specialized or have certain in-house processing methods that are specific to that company. So again, it doesn't really matter as far as your reporting. You should report based on the processing code and the part of the plant, as we mentioned before, but that some of them would be considered more specialized. And because of that, they're going to be going through the safety assessment process at a later time. So once all the first round materials are completed, then they'll start on the second round materials. But again, remember, because they are somewhat more specialized, you may be contacted for the components of those materials, the constituents, for that analytical information for safety assessment purposes.
Okay,
And Kimberly, I don't know if you wanted to add anything about the reporting table or anything like that.
No, that covers it. Thank you.
Okay, thanks.
Good, thank you. Well, that brings us to the end of our prepared questions. Are there questions from the audience that they'd like to put in the Q&A? For now, there are none. So if anyone has some that they would like to submit, now would be the opportunity to do so. We'll wait a few minutes for that to occur. If anyone has anything they would like to ask, there will be an opportunity to follow up with us later if something strikes you. But if you ask now, you'll get a faster answer, shall we say, because it may take a few days to answer by written procedure. Wait a few minutes.
Yeah, it's a unique opportunity to ask us. But while people are writing down their questions or not, I jump in, and I think not receiving so many questions to me is a demonstration of that we prepared the documentation very well that went out with the survey. And I mean, there has been a lot of work that went into this documentation, specifically by the people here in the webinar, but we also consulted with dedicated task forces, really trying to ensure that the written documentation already answers as many questions as possible. So not seeing that many here gives me a good feeling on the documentation that we have prepared. And if there is nothing coming in, we can actually conclude this webinar, certainly a bit earlier than expected. Still looking at the Q&As. No, there's nothing. Well, in this case, Shah, with your permission, I would conclude the webinar. And again, thanks to those who joined, who are obviously well informed. We had received these other questions already in advance, and I think and I hope they helped in answering some pending issues out there to provide more clarity. And thanks to the organizing team, and certainly thanks to my colleagues here. And can only wish everybody a nice rest of the day and a nice weekend ahead. Thank you very much, and speak to you soon on another topic. And again, if you have questions, write to info@ifrafragrance.org or to any of the panelists. Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.